The AK-47 clattered across the blood-stained hospital floor, and every eye in the room locked onto it. Staff Sergeant Mike Donovan lunged forward, but Dr. Helena Price, 55 years old, gray hair tied back, surgical scrubs, spotted with someone else's blood, was already moving. Her hand closed around the grip with disturbing familiarity. "Don't give that old lady the gun," Commander Jake Morrison shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "She's just a doctor. She'll get herself." Helena's first 3 shots dropped the insurgents in the doorway before Morrison finished his sentence. The 4th shot silenced him completely. Before we continue, please subscribe to this channel and stay until the very end of this story. Comment with your city name below so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now let's begin. The morning started the way every morning started at Hope Valley Medical Center, with someone dying. Helena's hands were inside a 16-year-old girl's chest cavity when the power flickered. She didn't look up from the surgical field, didn't pause in her compressions on the failing heart beneath her gloved fingers. "Generator backup should kick in," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the sweat rolling down her temples. "Someone check the fuel levels." Dr. Marcus Chen, the hospital director, stood across the operating table. At 38, he'd spent the last 6 months trying to push Helena toward administrative work, citing her age as a liability in high-stress surgical situations. Right now, watching her maintain perfect cardiac compressions while the lights stuttered his objections seemed particularly stupid. "Dr. Price, perhaps we should transfer this patient to—" "She'll die during transport," Helena interrupted, not looking up. "Her heart's going to restart in approximately 15 seconds, or we're going to lose her permanently. I'd appreciate if you could assist instead of offering suggestions that would kill my patient." Chen's jaw tightened, but he adjusted his position. The generator kicked in, flooding the surgical suite with harsh LED light. Helena's compressions never wavered, steady, measured the rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. The girl's heart jumped, stuttered, caught. "There she is," Helena whispered. "Welcome back, sweetheart." She was closing the incision when Commander Jake Morrison burst into the surgical suite, his young face flushed with either excitement or incompetence. Helena could never quite tell which. "Dr. Price, I need to speak with you about the security briefing you submitted." Helena continued suturing. "I'm in the middle of surgery, Commander. It's urgent. So is keeping this child's chest cavity sterile." Helena replied, her tone pleasant but firm. "You can wait in my office, or you can scrub in and help. Those are your options." Morrison shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Dr. Price, with all due respect, your report about suspicious reconnaissance activity around the hospital perimeter is, well, it's based on observations that don't align with our intelligence assessments." Helena tied off the final suture. "Nurse Patterson, can you close for me?" "Of course, Dr. Price." Helena stepped back from the table, stripped off her gloves, and finally looked at Morrison directly. He was young, maybe 32, with the kind of clean-cut confidence that came from never having his assumptions tested in actual combat. He wore his uniform like a costume, all the pieces correct, but somehow fundamentally wrong. "Commander, I've been watching armed men conduct surveillance on this hospital for the past 72 hours, Helena said quietly. "They're using spotters in overlapping shifts, mapping our security positions, counting our personnel. That's textbook pre-assault reconnaissance." Morrison's expression shifted between patronizing and dismissive. "Dr. Price, I appreciate your concern, but military intelligence is slightly outside your area of expertise. We have trained personnel monitoring. Your trained personnel are children playing dress-up." Helena interrupted, her voice still calm, but carrying an edge that made Morrison's eyes widen. "They're looking at their phones during guard rotations and chatting with local vendors who are feeding them information to pass along. 3 days ago, one of your soldiers told a local shopkeeper exactly how many security personnel we have on night shift. That shopkeeper works for Khalid Nazari." That's a serious accusation." "It's an observable fact," Helena corrected. "And if you don't start taking this seriously, people are going to die." Morrison straightened, trying to reclaim authority. "Dr. Price, with respect, leave the security assessments to those of us with actual military experience." Something flickered behind Helena's eyes, something cold and ancient and very, very dangerous. but her voice remained gentle, almost grandmotherly. "Of course, Commander. I'm sure you know best." Morrison left satisfied he'd put the old woman in her place. Helena watched him go, her expression unreadable. Nurse Patterson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd worked with Helena for 2 years, stepped closer. "Dr. Price, should I be worried?" "Yes," Helena said simply. "But keep it quiet. Start preparing emergency evacuation protocols for immobile patients. Nothing obvious. Just be ready." "Ready for what?" Helena's gaze drifted to the window where dust devils spun across the compound. "For people to learn that assumptions kill." The attack came 36 hours later at dawn. Helena was in the pediatric ward reading to a 7-year-old boy with shrapnel wounds when the first explosion tore through the hospital's communication center. The building shook. The lights died. And in the sudden darkness, Helena heard something that made her blood run cold, the synchronized crack of multiple breach charges detonating simultaneously. This wasn't random terrorism. This was a coordinated military assault. "Under the bed," she told the boy, her voice calm despite the screaming starting in the corridors. "Stay there until someone you know comes to get you. Don't come out for anyone else." She was moving before the child could respond, her body shifting into patterns she hadn't used in 30 years. The way she moved through the darkened hallway wasn't the careful shuffle of a 55-year-old civilian doctor. It was the flowing, balanced movement of someone trained in close-quarters combat. Someone who'd spent years learning how to be invisible until violence was the only option. The emergency generator kicked in, flooding the corridors with red emergency lighting. Through the crimson haze, Helena saw Staff Sergeant Mike Donovan, one of the few security personnel with actual combat experience, dragging a wounded soldier toward the emergency room. "Donovan!" Helena's voice cut through the chaos with unexpected authority. "Report!" Donovan looked up, confused by the command tone from the grandmother doctor. "Multiple breach points, ma'am. They hit communications first, then took out our primary security positions. I've got maybe 4 effective soldiers left out of 12. We're getting slaughtered out there." "Where's Morrison?" "Commander's in the main office trying to coordinate." Another explosion. Closer. The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from the south entrance, the distinctive bark of AK-47s mixing with the heavier punch of PKM machine guns. Helena's combat analysis kicked in: automatically coordinated assault, multiple entry points, communication disruption first. Professional military operation, not insurgent opportunism. They'd studied the hospital's layout, knew exactly where to hit, and they were moving fast. "How many attackers?" "Unknown, ma'am. At least 40, maybe more. They're using suppressive fire and tactical movement. These guys have serious training." Helena nodded, processing. 40-plus attackers against 4 effective soldiers, 28 staff members, and 65 patients, most immobile. The hospital's defensive position was indefensible. Security couldn't hold. Evacuation was impossible. Everyone was going to die unless someone changed the equation. "Donovan, I need you to listen very carefully," Helena said, her voice dropping to the tone of someone giving orders that would be followed without question. "Get every mobile patient and staff member to the surgical wing. Barricade the doors. Use medical equipment beds, anything heavy. Create a defensive position and hold it." "Ma'am, I should be out there fighting." "You should be protecting the people who can't protect themselves," Helena interrupted. "I'll buy you the time you need to get them secured." Donovan stared at her. "Dr. Price, you're a doctor. You can't—" "I can," Helena said simply. "And I will. Now move." Something in her tone, something hard and absolute and completely un-grandmother-like, made Donovan nod and start dragging the wounded soldier toward the surgical wing. Helena turned toward the sound of gunfire, her mind calculating angles and timing and probability of survival. 30 years ago, she had been Captain Helena Price, Marine Force Recon, conducting classified operations in places that officially didn't exist. She'd learned how to survive when outnumbered, how to turn terrain into advantage, how to make younger, stronger opponents die before they even understood what killed them. Then, an IED had nearly ended her life, and during her recovery, she'd discovered something unexpected. Saving lives felt better than taking them. She'd left the Marines' completed medical school and spent 25 years as a trauma surgeon. But certain skills don't fade. They just sleep, waiting for the moment when survival requires their awakening. Helena moved through the darkened corridor toward the emergency room where she could hear shouting in Pashto, the organized professional communication of a military unit clearing a structure. 3, maybe 4 hostiles in the immediate area. More coming. She needed weapons. The hospital's security office was 30 feet away where the guards kept their rifles and sidearms. But reaching it meant crossing an open corridor currently being swept by the assault force. An insurgent appeared at the corridor intersection, young, maybe 25, wearing tactical gear and carrying an AK-47 with the casual competence of someone who'd been shooting since childhood. He spotted a nurse cowering in a doorway and raised his weapon. Helena moved. Her combat knife, the one she kept strapped to her ankle, the one that regulations said a civilian doctor shouldn't carry, the one she'd never stopped wearing in 30 years, was in her hand before conscious thought caught up with muscle memory. She threw it with the kind of precision that came from hundreds of training hours, and the blade buried itself in the insurgent's throat before he could fire. He dropped gurgling, and Helena was already moving. She grabbed his AK-47 as he fell, checked the magazine 30 rounds full auto, and transitioned into a firing position that was textbook special operations. 2 more insurgents entered through the same doorway. Helena put them both down with controlled pairs, 2 shots center mass for each target, exactly the way Force Recon had trained her decades ago. They dropped before their brains could process that the gray-haired woman in surgical scrubs was the one killing them. Jesus Christ, someone whispered behind her. Helena turned. 3 hospital staff members, 2 nurses, and a young resident doctor stood frozen, staring at her with expressions somewhere between shock and terror. "Get to the surgical wing," Helena said calmly, her voice the same gentle tone she used when explaining post-operative care. "Donovan's setting up a safe zone. Go now." They ran. Helena ejected the AK-47's magazine, checked the rounds remaining 24, and moved toward the security office. Her body had fallen into old patterns, the kind of tactical movement that didn't appear in any civilian training manual. She was flowing through the space using corners and shadows, reading the environment the way a lifetime of combat experience had taught her. The security office door was open. Inside, she found what she needed: 2 M4 carbines, 4 magazines, a Glock 19, and a tactical vest. She loaded the vest with magazines, secured the Glock, and slung 1 M4 across her back while keeping the other ready. "Dr. Price," she turned. Commander Morrison stood in the doorway, his face pale, his sidearm drawn, but held incorrectly finger on the trigger muzzle. Discipline, non-existent. He looked like a child playing soldier. "Commander," Helena said neutrally. "What are you doing? You're a doctor, you can't— did you just—" "Yes," Helena interrupted. "I killed 3 insurgents. There are approximately 40 more inside this hospital, and they're going to execute everyone they find unless someone stops them. I'm stopping them." "You're a doctor." Morrison's voice cracked with something between outrage and panic. "You took an oath. First, do no harm." "My oath is to my patients," Helena corrected, her voice hardening. "And right now, the best way to protect them is to eliminate the threat trying to murder them. You can either help me or get out of my way." Morrison stared at her, his young face struggling to process what he was seeing. The grandmother who baked cookies for pediatric patients was standing in a security office armed like a commando, having just killed 3 men with clinical efficiency. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm a doctor," Helena said. "I'm also someone who learned a long time ago that protecting innocent lives sometimes requires taking guilty ones." "Now, are you going to help, or are you going to stand there questioning my credentials while people die?" Morrison's hand trembled on his sidearm. I don't—" "Then stay here," Helena said, not unkindly. "Protect this position. Don't let anyone through who isn't hospital staff. Can you do that?" Morrison nodded mutely. Helena moved past him into the corridor, where the sound of gunfire and screaming had intensified. The assault force was spreading through the hospital, methodically clearing rooms. She had maybe 3 minutes before they reached the surgical wing, where Donovan was trying to barricade 60-plus immobile patients and staff. 3 minutes to change the tactical equation. 3 minutes to become someone she'd stopped being 30 years ago. The hospital's layout worked in Helena's favor. She'd spent 2 years learning every corridor, every closet, every blind corner. The attackers had plans and blueprints. Helena had muscle memory and intimate knowledge of terrain. She positioned herself at a choke point, a T-intersection, where the main corridor fed into the patient wards. From this position, she could control movement toward the surgical wing while maintaining cover behind a nurse's station. And then she waited. Patience was a skill most young soldiers never learned. They wanted to move to act, to do something. But Helena had learned decades ago that the person who moves first usually dies first. Better to let the enemy come to you to control the engagement, to choose the moment of violence. 4 insurgents appeared at the far end of the corridor, moving in tactical formation, 2 by 2, covering each other's movement, professional and disciplined. They were clearing rooms as they advanced, checking corners, communicating with hand signals. Good training, good discipline. Completely inadequate against someone with Helena's experience. She let them get within 30 feet. Let them believe the corridor was clear. Let them drop their guard for just 1 second. Then she opened fire. The first insurgent dropped with 3 rounds in the chest. The second caught 2 in the head before he could process what was happening. The third and fourth scrambled for cover, but Helena had already anticipated their movement. She adjusted her angle and put them both down with the kind of precision shooting that only came from thousands of hours of range time. 4 down. Approximately 40 to go. Helena changed position, immediately moving to a new firing point before return fire could find her original location. This was the dance, shoot, move, communicate. Except, she was the only dancer, which meant she had to move twice as fast and think 3 steps ahead. More insurgents appeared, drawn by the gunfire. They were calling to each other in Pashto, coordinating their approach. Helena caught enough words to understand their tactics. They were trying to flank her, to pin her in place, while others moved around to attack from multiple angles. Standard infantry tactics. Effective against most opponents. Helena wasn't most opponents. She fell back to a secondary position, using her knowledge of the hospital's layout to create overlapping fields of fire. Every corridor, every doorway became a killing zone where her tactical advantage multiplied. She wasn't fighting 40 insurgents simultaneously. She was fighting them 3 or 4 at a time in spaces where their numbers meant nothing, and her experience meant everything. A younger soldier, someone like Morrison, would have panicked, would have tried to hold ground or make a heroic last stand. Helena understood that survival in combat wasn't about heroism. It was about making the enemy die for their mistakes while you remained frustratingly difficult to kill. She dropped 6 more insurgents in the next 4 minutes, using ammunition sparingly, every shot deliberate and necessary. Her breathing remained controlled, her hands steady. This wasn't panic or adrenaline. This was muscle memory and tactical awareness working in perfect harmony. "Contact South Corridor," someone shouted in Pashto. "We have casualties. The old woman is armed." Helena almost smiled. They were starting to understand their mistake. A voice crackled over what sounded like a radio. One of the insurgents was reporting to someone in command. "Commander Nazari, we have resistance. 1 fighter, civilian clothes, causing significant casualties." The response came in crisp English with a Pakistani accent. "1 fighter. You have 40 men. Kill this person and complete the mission." Helena recognized the voice. Khalid Nazari, a warlord who'd spent the last 3 years conducting increasingly sophisticated attacks against Western targets. Intelligence suggested he'd been trained by Pakistani ISI before going rogue. Dangerous, competent, and according to all reports, utterly merciless. He was about to learn that mercy wasn't required when protecting innocent lives. Staff Sergeant Donovan found Helena 15 minutes into the assault, crouched behind an overturned medical cart, reloading her M4 with practiced efficiency. Bodies littered the corridor behind her, 12 insurgents, all killed with the kind of precise marksmanship that spoke to professional military training. "Dr. Price," Donovan breathed, his voice filled with something between awe and horror. "What the hell is happening?" "I'm protecting our patients," Helena replied calmly, charging the rifle's bolt. "How's the surgical wing?" "Barricaded. Maybe 40 patients and 15 staff inside." But Dr. Price, you're killing these guys like someone with 30 years of combat experience, Helena finished. That's because I have 30 years of combat experience, Sergeant. And right now that experience is the only thing keeping everyone in this hospital alive. Donovan stared at her. You were military, Marine Force Recon, Helena said, checking her remaining ammunition. Classified operations places that officially don't exist. That was before I decided saving lives was more satisfying than taking them. She glanced at him. Though apparently sometimes you have to do both. Ma'am, I don't understand. You don't need to understand, Helena said, not unkindly. You just need to trust me. How many effective soldiers do we have left? 3, including me. Morrison's barricaded in the security office having some kind of breakdown. Helena nodded. Predictable. The others. Specialist Rodriguez and Private Chen are defending the main entrance. They're doing okay, but they're young and scared. Scared is smart, Helena said. Confident gets you killed. Where's the heaviest concentration of attackers? They're trying to breach the emergency room. Looks like they're setting up some kind of heavy weapon, maybe an RPG or recoilless rifle. If they punch through there, they'll have a straight shot to the surgical wing. Helena's tactical mind processed this instantly. The attackers were adapting, bringing in heavier firepower to overcome the unexpected resistance. Smart, which meant she needed to be smarter. I need you to get Rodriguez and Chen, Helena said. Pull them back to the surgical wing's outer corridor. Set up defensive positions with overlapping fire. Don't try to hold the entire hospital, we can't. Just create a defensive perimeter around the patients. What about you? I'm going to discourage them from using heavy weapons indoors, Helena said, standing. Tell Rodriguez and Chen that if they see a woman in surgical scrubs carrying military weapons, don't shoot her. I'd rather not get killed by friendly fire after surviving 30 years of combat. Donovan hesitated. Ma'am, with respect, you're 55 years old. You can't... Helena looked at him, and Donovan's words died. Her expression hadn't changed, still the same calm, grandmotherly face he'd seen hundreds of times. But something in her eyes, something ancient and absolutely lethal, made him take an involuntary step backward. Sergeant, Helena said quietly, I'm 55 because I'm good at surviving. Every person who thought my age made me weak didn't live long enough to correct their assumption. Now, are you going to follow orders, or are you going to stand here questioning whether I'm capable of doing what I've been doing for the last 15 minutes? Donovan saluted a crisp professional salute that acknowledged not a doctor, but a superior officer. Yes, ma'am. He ran toward the main entrance, leaving Helena alone in the corridor with 12 dead insurgents and approximately 30 more trying to kill everyone she'd sworn to protect. She checked her remaining ammunition, 22 rounds in the current magazine, 3 full magazines in her vest, plus the Glock as backup. Not enough for a prolonged firefight, but enough if she was smart about engagement. And Helena had spent 30 years learning how to be smart about engagement. She moved toward the emergency room where she could hear insurgents coordinating their attack in Pashto. They were setting up a heavy weapon. She could hear the distinctive metallic scraping of something being assembled. The emergency room had 2 entrances, the main door from the corridor and a service entrance that connected to the supply area. Most people didn't know about the service entrance. It was used primarily by maintenance staff. Helena had spent 2 years memorizing every entrance exit and access point in this hospital. She circled around through the supply area, moving silently through darkness, her breathing controlled and measured. Through the service entrance door, she could hear voices, at least 6 insurgents, maybe more focused on assembling their heavy weapon. Helena pulled a smoke grenade from one of the dead insurgents' tactical vests, a decision made 15 minutes ago when she'd realized standard firefight tactics wouldn't be enough. She pulled the pin counted to 2 and tossed it through the service entrance into the emergency room. Gray smoke erupted, filling the space in seconds. Shouting. Confusion. Insurgents stumbling, trying to maintain their position, unable to see. Helena entered through the smoke like a ghost. She killed 3 insurgents before they even realized she was there. Controlled shots, precise placement, no wasted ammunition. 2 more died trying to figure out where the shooting was coming from. The 6th managed to get off a burst from his AK-47, but his shots went wild, hitting ceiling tiles and medical equipment. Helena put him down with 2 shots to the chest. 6 more casualties. The heavy weapon, an RPG-7, lay partially assembled on the emergency room floor, now useless without the crew to operate it. Helena grabbed the RPG warheads, 3 of them, and carried them back toward the supply area. She had an idea, the kind of idea that would either save everyone in the hospital or get her killed. Probably both. Khalid Nazari entered the hospital personally, 23 minutes after the assault began, flanked by his personal security detail, 4 men who moved with the precision of former Special Forces operators. He'd expected to find a hospital full of corpses by now, a clean operation that would send a message about attacking Western humanitarian targets. Instead, he found a hospital full of his own casualties and increasingly frantic reports about the old woman who was systematically destroying his assault force. "Show me," he commanded. His lieutenant led him to the main corridor where 12 bodies lay in tactical formation, all killed with precise shots to vital areas, no wasted ammunition, professional execution. Nazari studied the scene with the eye of someone who'd spent decades in combat. One shooter did this. "Yes, Commander, a woman. Hospital staff say she's a doctor, approximately 55 years old." Nazari's expression darkened. "A 55-year-old doctor killed 12 of my men." "Yes, Commander. Then she's not just a doctor," Nazari said quietly. "Get me intel. I want to know who this woman really is." But intelligence gathering took time, and time was something Nazari no longer had. His assault was failing. He'd committed 48 fighters to an operation that should have been completed in 15 minutes, and instead he was losing men to a single opponent his lieutenant described as a grandmother in surgical scrubs. The humiliation was almost worse than the tactical failure. Where is she now? "Unknown, Commander. She's moving through the hospital using terrain advantage. We can't pin her down." Nazari nodded slowly. He'd fought Americans before, overconfident, aggressive, technologically dependent. But this woman was fighting like someone trained in a different era, using tactics that suggested special operations experience from decades past, which meant she was dangerous in ways his younger fighters couldn't comprehend. "Pull everyone back," Nazari ordered. "Consolidate forces. We're going to stop chasing her and start making her come to us." "How, Commander?" Nazari smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "We're going to give her a choice: surrender, or watch everyone in the surgical wing die. Even the most skilled fighter can't win when innocent lives are the battlefield." Helena heard the change in tactics before she saw it. The random shooting stopped. The scattered movement of insurgents coordinating through corridors ceased. Everything went quiet. Too quiet. She'd been in enough combat to know what silence meant. The enemy was regrouping, changing strategy, preparing something worse than straightforward assault. She moved toward the surgical wing where Donovan and the others had barricaded the patients. Through a window, she could see them: surgical staff, security personnel, and patients all pressed together in a space designed for sterile operations, not defensive last stands. Commander Morrison was there too, his face pale, his hands shaking. He'd finally left the security office, though, whether from courage or panic, Helena couldn't tell. Her radio crackled, one of the insurgents' radios she'd taken from a casualty. A voice spoke in English, heavily accented but clear. "To the American fighter. This is Commander Khalid Nazari. I'm impressed by your skills. 12 of my men dead. Very professional. But this game ends now." Helena keyed the radio. "Commander Nazari, I'm familiar with your work. 17 attacks on civilian targets in the last 3 years. 247 casualties, mostly women and children. You enjoy targeting the defenseless. And you enjoy playing soldier while wearing a doctor's costume." Nazari replied, his voice smooth. "Who are you, CIA Special Activities Division? You fight like someone trained by Americans, but with tactics too old for current doctrine." "I'm just a doctor," Helena said, "trying to protect my patients." Nazari laughed. "A doctor who kills like a Special Forces operator, no. You're something else. But it doesn't matter. I have 40 men remaining. You have limited ammunition, and I'm now surrounding the surgical wing where all your precious patients hide. So here's my offer. Surrender yourself, and I'll let everyone else live." Continue fighting, and I'll execute every person in that surgical wing, starting with the children." Helena's grip tightened on the radio. Through the window, she could see the children, a 7-year-old boy with shrapnel wounds, a 12-year-old girl recovering from emergency surgery, a teenager who'd stepped on a landmine, all of them looking to adults to keep them safe, all of them trusting that someone would protect them. "You have 3 minutes to decide," Nazari continued. "After that, we start shooting through the doors. Your choice, doctor. Die alone like a soldier, or watch everyone die like the coward hiding behind civilian lives." The radio went silent. Helena stood in the darkened corridor, 55 years old, running low on ammunition, facing 40 trained fighters, led by a commander who understood exactly how to break her. 30 years ago, Captain Helena Price would have known exactly what to do. She'd been trained for impossible situations, for combat against overwhelming odds, for making the hard choices that kept other people alive. But 30 years ago, she'd also been someone different, someone harder, someone who could look at tactical equations and see acceptable losses. She'd stopped being that person. She'd become a doctor. She'd spent 25 years saving lives, believing that healing was better than fighting, that compassion mattered more than combat skills. Now, standing in this blood-stained corridor, she realized something: she didn't have to choose between those identities. She was both. Helena keyed the radio one last time. "Commander Nazari," she said quietly, "I have a counteroffer. You have 3 minutes to withdraw your forces from this hospital. After that, I stop being defensive and start hunting every single one of you through these corridors. You've lost 12 men. I haven't taken a scratch. Think about those odds." Silence. Then, Nazari's voice, harder now with an edge of anger, "You're bluffing." "Your 12 dead men suggest otherwise," Helena replied. 3 minutes, Commander. And trust me, you don't want to see what happens after that clock runs out. Because right now, I'm a doctor trying to minimize casualties. But if you force me to choose between your men's lives and my patient's safety..." She let the pause stretch. "I've already made that choice. 30 years ago. And I've had 3 decades to get very, very good at it." Helena clicked off the radio and checked her remaining ammunition one final time. The clock was running, and the old woman with the gun was done being underestimated. The 3 minutes expired in silence, broken only by Helena's controlled breathing and the distant sound of insurgents repositioning. She'd moved to the hospital's pharmaceutical storage room, a windowless space most people forgot existed, with a single reinforced door and shelving units filled with medications that represented both healing and, in the right hands, tactical advantage. "Dr. Price," Donovan's voice crackled through the radio she'd taken from a dead insurgent. "They're setting up positions around the surgical wing. I count at least 20 hostiles. We can't hold if they breach." "You won't have to," Helena replied, her hands moving through the pharmaceutical inventory with practiced efficiency. "I'm going to make them choose between hunting me and attacking you. They can't do both effectively." "Ma'am, that's suicide." "No, Sergeant. That's tactics." Helena pulled 3 bottles of highly flammable medical-grade ethanol, 2 oxygen tanks, and a box of surgical tubing. "Keep everyone quiet. Don't fire unless they breach. Make them think you're helpless." "We are helpless." "You're bait," Helena corrected. "There's a difference. I need them focused on you while I flank their position. Can you do that?" A long pause. "Yes, ma'am." Helena clicked off and continued assembling what her Force Recon instructor had once called field expedient deterrence, a polite term for homemade explosives that officially didn't exist in any military manual. The oxygen tanks could be rigged with the ethanol to create incendiary devices. The surgical tubing worked as delayed fuses, and the morphine in her pocket would keep her functional if she took damage. She was creating weapons from healing supplies, turning a hospital into a battlefield. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Captain Price." Helena spun pistol raised, then lowered it. Commander Morrison stood in the doorway, his face no longer pale, but flushed with something between shame and desperation. "It's Dr. Price now," Helena said quietly, returning to her work. "I haven't been a captain in 30 years. Those 12 men you killed, 12 insurgents who were executing hospital staff, Helena interrupted, not looking up. If you have a problem with that commander, I suggest you file a complaint after we survive the next hour. If we survive. Morrison stepped closer, his hands clenched. You made me look like a fool. Helena paused in her work, then met his eyes. No, Commander. You made yourself look like a fool by assuming that age and gender determine capability. I just corrected your assumption in the most efficient way possible by keeping everyone alive while you had a breakdown in the security office. I'm not trained for this. I'm an advisor. I coordinate logistics. You don't fight. Helena finished. I know. That's why I told you to stay in the security office. She secured the last connection on her improvised explosive. But since you're here, make yourself useful. Can you carry equipment? Morrison stared at the device she'd assembled. Did you just build a bomb from hospital supplies? Incendiary device, Helena corrected. Bombs explode. This burns hot enough to compromise structural integrity and create smoke screens. I need 3 of them positioned at strategic choke points. She met his eyes again. Can you help, or are you going to lecture me about rules of engagement while 40 insurgents prepare to execute everyone in the surgical wing? Morrison's jaw worked. He was young, inexperienced, overwhelmed by a situation his training never prepared him for. But buried under all that inadequacy was something Helena recognized: the desire to matter, to be useful, to prove he wasn't completely useless. Tell me what to do, he said finally. Helena handed him the first device. Corridor outside the pediatric ward. Set it against the wall. Pull this cord when I radio the signal. The burn time is approximately 45 seconds before ignition. That's how long you have to get clear. What if I don't make it? Then you'll die bravely instead of uselessly, Helena said. Which would you prefer? Morrison took the device with shaking hands. I don't want to die at all. Then move fast and follow orders exactly. Helena's tone softened slightly. Commander, you're not a combat soldier. Nobody expects you to be. But right now I need someone who can follow instructions without questioning every decision. Can you be that person? Morrison nodded slowly. I can try. Trying gets people killed. Do or don't. I will, Morrison said, and this time his voice carried more conviction. I'll do it. He left carrying the incendiary device like it might explode at any moment, which Helena reflected it might. Improvised explosives were notoriously unpredictable, but predictability was a luxury she couldn't afford. Helena assembled 2 more devices, then loaded her remaining ammunition into easily accessible pouches. She had maybe 60 rounds total across all weapons. Against 40 trained fighters, that meant every shot had to count. Her radio crackled. Nazari's voice cold now, the earlier smoothness replaced with barely controlled anger. Your 3 minutes are over, Doctor. Last chance to surrender. Helena keyed the radio. Commander, I spent 30 years learning that the person who talks the most usually dies first. You've been talking for 6 minutes. I've been preparing. Draw your own conclusions. You're one woman. You had 48 men, Helena replied calmly. Now you have 36. In another hour, you'll have significantly fewer. The question isn't whether I can beat you, Commander. The question is, how many of your men are you willing to sacrifice before you realize this hospital is where your reputation dies? She clicked off before he could respond. Donovan's voice immediately replaced Nazari's. Dr. Price. They're moving. Multiple contacts advancing on the surgical wing from 3 directions. Let them come, Helena said. Morrison, are you in position? Yes, ma'am. Morrison's voice was tight with fear, but steady. Ready on your signal. Rodriguez Chen, hold your positions, but do not engage yet. Make them think you're trying to hide. Specialist Rodriguez, a 24-year-old from Texas who'd been doing security work for 8 months, came back with a question in her voice. Ma'am, we're just letting them approach. You're making them believe they've won, Helena corrected. There's a difference. When they're confident, they're careless. When they're careless, they die. She moved through the hospital's maintenance corridors, narrow passages designed for custodial staff unknown to the attackers and barely remembered by most hospital personnel. Helena had mapped every inch of these passages during her first month at Hope Valley, the old combat instinct, insisting on knowing every possible route and escape path. That instinct was paying dividends now. Through ventilation grates, she watched insurgents advancing on the surgical wing. They moved in staggered formations, covering each other's movement, professional and disciplined. Nazari had trained them well, but they were trained for conventional combat against predictable opponents. Helena was neither conventional nor predictable. She positioned herself above the main corridor in the ceiling crawl space, where HVAC ducts created a network of elevated firing positions. From here, she had overlapping fields of fire on 3 approach routes. "Morrison now," she whispered into the radio. A pause. Then cord pulled. "I'm moving 45 seconds. Helena counted down, watching insurgents advance below her, unaware of what was coming. 30 seconds. They were in optimal position, clustered at the intersection where all 3 approach routes converged. 15 seconds. Morrison's running footsteps echoed through an adjacent corridor. He was going to make it. 5 seconds. The lead insurgent raised his hand, signaling his squad to prepare for breach. 0. The incendiary device ignited with a whoosh that sucked oxygen from the corridor. White-hot flames erupted, and suddenly 12 insurgents were scrambling, screaming, trying to escape an inferno that had appeared without warning. The smoke billowed thick and black, filling the corridor, turning organized advance into panicked chaos. Helena opened fire through the smoke. She couldn't see targets clearly, but she didn't need to. She'd memorized their positions in the seconds before ignition, calculated their likely movement, and now she fired into the chaos with precision that came from decades of experience. The screaming intensified. Bodies dropped. The survivors tried to return fire, but they were shooting blind, their rounds hitting walls and ceiling. Helena had already moved to a secondary position before their return fire arrived. "Second device," she radioed. "West corridor. Morrison, can you reach it?" Yes, I think." "Don't think. Do it. Now." She heard Morrison running again, his footsteps uneven with fear and adrenaline. Through the smoke, she saw insurgents trying to regroup, their training reasserting itself despite the chaos. A squad leader was shouting orders, pulling his men back from the kill zone, reestablishing tactical coherence. Good training. Professional discipline. Helena shot him first. The squad leader dropped and the coherence died with him. His men scattered, some trying to advance, others falling back, the unified assault dissolving into individual survival instincts. "Device placed," Morrison gasped. "Pulling cord. Moving." The second incendiary ignited 30 seconds later, cutting off the western approach route. More screaming, more smoke. The surgical wing was now surrounded by fire and chaos, and the insurgents who'd expected to breach defenseless doors instead found themselves trapped in corridors filled with smoke and a shooter they couldn't locate. "Rodriguez Chen now," Helena commanded. "Controlled fire, pick your targets, don't waste ammunition." Both security personnel opened fire from their defensive positions, adding to the chaos. They weren't skilled shooters, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to create more noise, more confusion, more reasons for the insurgents to believe they were facing a larger, more organized force. Nazari's voice cut through the radio, sharp with fury. "All units fall back. Regroup at the emergency room. Fall back now." The insurgents retreated, dragging wounded, leaving dead. Their professional advance turned into chaotic withdrawal. Helena counted casualties as they fled. At least 8 more, killed another 6 wounded, badly enough to slow their movement. She'd cut Nazari's effective force by almost half without engaging in a direct firefight. Donovan's voice came through, awed and slightly terrified. "Dr. Price, what the hell just happened?" "I made them afraid," Helena replied simply, already moving to a new position. Fear kills tactical discipline faster than bullets. They came in confident. They're leaving traumatized. That changes everything. They'll be back. Of course they will, but now they know what they're facing. Now they're questioning whether this mission is worth their lives. Now they're afraid of the grandmother in surgical scrubs. Helena reloaded her M4, counting remaining rounds. "Fear is my tactical advantage, Sergeant. I'm going to use it." Morrison's voice shaky but present. "Dr. Price, I did it. I didn't think I could." "You followed orders and kept people alive," Helena interrupted. That's all combat is, Commander. Following orders and surviving long enough to follow the next ones. You did well. A pause. Then quietly, "Thank you, ma'am." Helena didn't respond. She was already calculating the next move, the next engagement, the next way to make 40 men afraid of one 55-year-old doctor. The mathematics of combat were simple. Make the enemy believe their losses aren't worth their objectives. Make them question their leadership. Make them fear engagement more than they fear retreat. Nazari had numbers. Helena had terror. And terror, she'd learned 30 years ago, was the most effective weapon in close-quarters combat. The emergency room had become Nazari's command post, and Helena could hear him through the walls shouting at his men, demanding explanations, trying to restore order to an assault that had turned into a nightmare. "One woman," he was screaming in Pashto. "One old woman is destroying us. How is this possible?" Helena smiled grimly. She'd been underestimated her entire military career, first for being a woman, then for being too young, eventually for being too old. Every assumption had been a weapon she'd learned to use. Nazari was learning the same lesson his 12 dead fighters had learned earlier: assumptions kill. She positioned herself outside the emergency room's service entrance, the same route she'd used to eliminate the RPG team. This time, she wasn't going in. This time, she was going to make them come to her. Helena pulled the third incendiary device from her pack and set it against the emergency room's main entrance, the only door large enough for multiple fighters to breach simultaneously. Then she backed away, found cover behind a supply cart, and waited. Patience. Always patience. 5 minutes passed. 10. She could hear Nazari planning, reorganizing, preparing for another assault. His voice carried through the walls, confident again, reassuring his men that they outnumbered this woman, that she was running low on ammunition, that the next attack would succeed where the first had failed. Helena let him talk. Let him rebuild confidence. Let him make his men believe they could still win. Then she radioed Rodriguez. "Fire 3 shots into the ceiling. Make noise. Make them think we're panicking." Rodriguez complied. 3 shots echoed through the hospital, random and uncontrolled, exactly the kind of panicked fire that suggested defenders losing composure. Through the emergency room walls, Helena heard the change in tone. Nazari's voice sharp with renewed confidence. "They're breaking all units. Prepare to breach the surgical wing. This ends now." The emergency room door burst open, and insurgents poured out, not cautiously this time, but aggressively, believing they were facing defeated opposition. They moved fast, bunched together, focused on reaching the surgical wing quickly. Professional assault tactics. Against most opponents, it would have worked perfectly. Helena triggered the incendiary device. The flames erupted directly in the doorway, catching the first 6 insurgents in an inferno they couldn't escape. The ones behind crashed into them, creating a pileup in the choke point. Screaming, burning, chaos. Helena fired into the mass of bodies, controlled shots, each round finding targets who couldn't dodge or return fire effectively. She wasn't aiming for specific insurgents anymore. She was shooting into a cluster of enemy combatants trapped in a kill zone of her own creation. 10 seconds of firing. 15. 20. When she stopped, 12 more insurgents were down, killed or wounded so badly they were out of the fight. The survivors retreated back into the emergency room, and Helena could hear Nazari screaming, his voice breaking with rage and something else, fear. He was beginning to understand what his men had learned 30 minutes ago. They weren't fighting a doctor. They were fighting someone who'd spent decades learning how to kill professionally, efficiently, and without mercy when necessary. "All units," Nazari's voice carried through the walls. "Forget the surgical wing. Find the woman. Kill her, now." Helena smiled without humor. Good. Angry enemies made mistakes. Frightened enemies made even more. She moved through the hospital's maintenance corridors again, but this time she wasn't hunting. This time she was leaving a trail, subtle but detectable, that would draw insurgents after her while pulling them away from the surgical wing. A dropped magazine here. A blood trail there, her own blood from a shallow cut she'd given herself specifically for this purpose. Evidence that she'd been in these corridors, that she was wounded, that she was vulnerable. Bait for hunters who didn't realize they were being hunted. Specialist Chen's voice crackled through the radio. Dr. Price, I've got movement in the maintenance wing. Looks like 6 hostiles tracking something. That's me they're tracking, Helena replied calmly. Let them come. Maintain your position at the surgical wing. Don't engage unless they directly threaten patients. Ma'am, they're hunting you. No, Private. I'm hunting them. They just don't know it yet. She heard them before she saw them. 6 insurgents moving through the narrow maintenance corridors following her blood trail with weapons raised and nerves frayed by 30 minutes of watching their comrades die to an enemy they couldn't predict. Helena had positioned herself in the laundry room among industrial washing machines and dryers that created sound cover and visual obstacles. She'd turned on all the machines before hiding, filling the space with rhythmic noise that masked her breathing and movement. The insurgents entered cautiously, sweeping corners, checking behind equipment. Professional room clearing techniques. Good tactical discipline despite their fear. Helena let them fully commit to the room before attacking. She emerged from behind an industrial dryer, her pistol firing in controlled pairs. 2 insurgents dropped before the others even registered her presence. The remaining 4 spun toward her, but she was already moving, using the washing machines as cover, forcing them to split their attention between tracking her movement and not shooting each other in the confined space. 3rd insurgent down. 4th. The last 2 finally opened fire, but their rounds hit washing machines and walls, while Helena flowed between obstacles with the kind of movement that only came from decades of practice. 5th insurgent dropped. The 6th tried to run to escape back into the corridor to get away from the gray-haired demon who'd killed his entire squad in under 30 seconds. Except Helena shot him in the doorway. He fell, blocking the exit, and the laundry room suddenly seemed very quiet except for the rhythmic churning of washing machines and Helena's controlled breathing. 6 more casualties. Nazari's force was down to approximately 18 effective fighters now, and the psychological damage was worse than the numerical losses. Every attack had failed. Every tactical decision had resulted in casualties. Every time they engaged this woman, more of them died. Helena checked her ammunition, 14 rounds in the M48 and the Glock, no spare magazines left. She'd used most of her supplies creating the incendiary devices. She was running low on everything except determination. Donovan's voice. Dr. Price, you okay? We heard gunfire in the maintenance wing. 6 more down. Helena reported, stripping magazines from the dead insurgents. I'm low on ammunition but mobile. How's the surgical wing? Quiet. No attempts at breach since your last engagement. I think they're afraid to try. Good. Keep everyone calm. This isn't over yet. But it was close to over. Helena could feel it in the way the insurgents were moving now, less aggressive, more defensive. The confidence of their initial assault replaced with the caution of soldiers who'd learned respect for their opponent. She returned to the hospital's central corridor, where bodies from earlier engagements still lay where they'd fallen. The smell of blood and smoke filled the air, mixing with the antiseptic that had defined this place before it became a battlefield. Helena's radio crackled. Nazari's voice, but different now. Quieter. Harder. Dr. Price. I know that's your name now. Helena Price. My sources just confirmed your identity. Helena didn't respond, letting him talk. Captain Helena Price, Marine Force Recon, classified operations for 7 years before medical discharge. 73 confirmed kills in missions that officially never happened. Combat decorations buried under classification so deep they might as well not exist. A pause. You're not a doctor playing soldier. You're a soldier playing doctor. I'm both, Helena replied finally. And right now, Commander, you're losing to both versions of me. This hospital will be your grave. Maybe, Helena acknowledged. But it's already the grave of 30 of your men. How many more are you willing to sacrifice? How many before your survivors refuse to follow you into another engagement with someone who's killed more insurgents than you have remaining fighters? Silence. Long silence. Then Nazari's voice, cold and flat. We're not retreating. I know, Helena said. You can't. Your reputation depends on completing this mission. But here's what you haven't calculated. Commander, my reputation was earned by surviving missions that should have killed me. By outlasting opponents who were younger, stronger, better equipped. By being too stubborn to die when everyone expected me to. She paused, letting that sink in. You came here to massacre defenseless people. Instead, you found me. And I've spent 30 years learning that the most dangerous person in any fight isn't the strongest or the fastest. It's the one with the most to lose and the least to fear. I'm protecting 65 patients who can't protect themselves. What are you protecting? Commander, your pride. No response. Helena continued. Every minute you stay in this hospital, I'm learning your tactics, your movement patterns, your decision-making, and every minute you stay, more of your men die. You can't win this, Commander. You can only choose how many casualties you're willing to accept before admitting it. The radio went silent. Helena knew what came next. Nazari couldn't retreat. His authority depended on successful operations. He couldn't negotiate. She'd proven too dangerous to trust, which left only one option: personal confrontation. Commanders who'd suffered this level of tactical defeat either fled or attempted to restore their authority through dramatic action. Nazari wasn't the fleeing type, which meant he was coming for her personally. Helena checked her remaining ammunition one final time and moved toward the hospital's central atrium, the largest open space in the facility with multiple approaches and no significant cover. Not an ideal defensive position, but perfect for forcing a confrontation on her terms. She was tired. Her hands hurt from weapon recoil. Her knees ached from constant movement. At 55, her body wasn't recovering the way it had at 25, and every engagement was taking a physical toll that younger soldiers wouldn't feel. But she'd learned long ago that combat wasn't about who was strongest or fastest. It was about who wanted to survive more. And Helena had 65 patients depending on her survival. That was all the motivation she needed. The central atrium waited in silence, broken only by the hum of emergency generators and Helena's measured breathing. She'd positioned herself behind the reception desk, not ideal cover, but it gave her angles on 3 approach corridors and kept her back to a solid wall. Her M4 rested across the desk surface, the Glock within easy reach. 14 rounds and 8 rounds. 22 bullets between survival and death. She'd faced worse odds before. Footsteps echoed from the eastern corridor. Not the cautious movement of frightened insurgents, but the deliberate stride of someone who'd stopped caring about tactical caution. Helena raised the M4 finger on the trigger, breathing controlled. Khalid Nazari emerged from the corridor alone. He was younger than Helena expected, maybe 38, with the lean build of someone who'd spent decades in combat zones. His tactical vest showed wear from years of use, and the AK-47 he carried moved with the easy familiarity of a favored tool. His eyes found Helena immediately, and something like respect flickered across his face before hardening into determination. "Captain Price," he said, his English crisp despite the accent. "You're older than I imagined." "You're younger than I hoped," Helena replied, keeping her rifle trained on his center mass. "Young men are harder to reason with. They still believe in glory." Nazari smiled without warmth. "And old women believe in mercy. Old women believe in survival. Mercy is for people who haven't watched enough people die." Helena's finger remained steady on the trigger. "Put down the weapon, Commander. Your men are dead or dying. This mission failed the moment you assumed a humanitarian hospital would be defenseless." "I assumed it would be defended by soldiers," Nazari countered. "Not by grandmothers pretending to be warriors." "I'm not pretending anything," Helena said quietly. "I stopped pretending 30 years ago when I realized that being a warrior and being a healer aren't opposites. They're two sides of the same commitment, protecting life by any means necessary." Nazari's grip shifted on his rifle. "You've killed 30 of my men." 32, Helena corrected. "And I'll kill you too if you don't put down that weapon. I don't want to. Every life I take requires another life saved to balance the equation. But I will kill you, Commander, if you force me to choose between your life and my patient's safety." "You're out of ammunition." "I have enough." Helena's voice remained calm, but her eyes never left his. "The question is whether you're willing to gamble that I'll miss my first shot. At this range against a stationary target with 3 decades of marksmanship experience. Do you feel lucky, Commander?" Nazari's jaw tightened. For a long moment, neither moved. The atrium held its breath, waiting for someone to make the decision that would end this standoff. Then Nazari lowered his rifle slowly, deliberately, and set it on the floor. Helena's surprise must have shown on her face because Nazari laughed a bitter, exhausted sound. "You think I'm surrendering," he said. "No, Captain. I'm accepting your challenge. You've earned that much. Soldier to soldier without the weapons that make killing easy. Hand to hand. The way warriors settled things before guns made cowards of us all." Helena's tactical mind processed this instantly. He was younger, stronger, trained in close-quarters combat. She was 55, exhausted from 40 minutes of continuous fighting, running on adrenaline and muscle memory that was 3 decades old. The smart move was to shoot him where he stood. But something in Helena, the part that had never quite abandoned the warrior's code, made her lower the M4. "You're making a mistake," she said, setting the rifle aside but keeping the Glock within reach. "I'm old, Commander, but I'm old because I'm good at staying alive. Age isn't weakness, it's proof of competence." Nazari smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Then prove it." He moved first, a straight punch aimed at her throat, fast and professional. Helena deflected it, redirecting his momentum, rather than blocking, directly using his strength against him, the way Force Recon had taught her when fighting larger opponents. Nazari recovered instantly, transitioning into a low kick that Helena barely avoided. He was good, better than good. His movements showed training from multiple martial disciplines, probably Spetsnaz hand-to-hand combat mixed with traditional wrestling techniques. Helena didn't try to match his strength. She couldn't. Instead, she moved like water flowing around his attacks, using positioning and timing rather than force. Every movement hurt her knees, protesting her back, aching, her hands already sore from weapon recoil. But pain was just information, and right now the information said she needed to end this fast before exhaustion made her sloppy. Nazari threw a combination punch-kick elbow strike, each blow delivered with killing intent. Helena deflected the first, dodged the second, and caught the third on her forearm. The impact sent pain shooting up to her shoulder, but she used his extended position to drive her palm into his nose. Bone crunched. Blood spurted. Nazari stumbled back, cursing in Pashto. "First rule of fighting someone older," Helena said, her breathing controlled despite the exertion. "We don't waste movement. Every action has a purpose. You're fighting to prove something. I'm fighting to survive. There's a difference." Nazari wiped blood from his face, his expression shifting from confident to calculating. "You were Force Recon. We studied your operations and training. Ghost missions in Central America, classified actions in the Middle East. 73 confirmed kills. 81, Helena corrected, circling to maintain optimal positioning. 7 were classified above the level your sources could access, and 1 more tonight if you keep pushing this." "You're tired." "I'm always tired. I'm 55. Tired is my natural state." Helena's voice carried a hint of dark humor. "But tired and dead are different conditions, Commander. I've spent 30 years being tired and surviving. How long have you been arrogant and lucky?" Nazari attacked again, faster this time, more aggressive, trying to overwhelm her with speed and strength. Helena gave ground, letting him think he was winning, waiting for the opening that always came when younger fighters got confident. There his guard dropped for half a second as he threw a high kick. Helena drove her fist into his kidney, a precise strike that targeted nerve clusters. Nazari gasped, his body betraying him as the pain interrupted his nervous system signals. Helena followed with an elbow to his jaw, then a knee to his solar plexus. 3 strikes in 2 seconds, each one surgical in its precision, targeting vulnerabilities that Force Recon had taught her decades ago. Nazari went down gasping, and Helena was already moving to pin him. But he rolled faster than she expected, and suddenly his hand was around her throat, squeezing with desperate strength. "Old woman," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "You should have shot me." Helena's vision started to darken at the edges. Her hands clawed at his grip, but he was stronger, younger, and he knew he was winning. She could see it in his eyes the moment he believed he'd finally overcome the grandmother who'd killed 32 of his men. That belief was his last mistake. Helena stopped fighting his grip and instead drove her thumbs into specific pressure points on his wrists, nerve strikes that Force Recon had taught her for exactly this situation. Nazari's hands spasmed involuntarily, his grip loosening for just a second. 1 second was enough. Helena twisted, breaking his hold, and drove her knee into his throat with 30 years of survival instinct behind the strike. Nazari choked his hands, flying to his crushed windpipe, and Helena followed with a strike to his temple that had all her remaining strength behind it. Nazari collapsed unconscious before he hit the floor. Helena stood over him, breathing hard, her hands shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. She'd won, but the victory felt hollow. He was unconscious, not dead. She could kill him now, finish what she'd started, eliminate a threat who'd spent years terrorizing civilians. Her hand moved toward the Glock, then stopped. "I'm a doctor," Helena whispered to herself, her voice cracking. "I save lives. That's what I do. That's who I am." She secured Nazari's hands with medical tape, checked his breathing to ensure the throat strike hadn't caused permanent damage, and stood. Her entire body hurt. Her hands were shaking. She was 55 years old, and she'd just fought a man 20 years younger in hand-to-hand combat while running on adrenaline and stubbornness. She'd also won. Again. Like she'd been winning for 30 years despite everyone's assumptions about age and gender and capability. "Dr. Price," Donovan's voice crackled through the radio, urgent and afraid. "We have a situation. The insurgents outside, the ones who fled earlier, they're regrouping. Looks like they're preparing for one final assault. Without Nazari's orders to stop them, they're coming in." Helena closed her eyes briefly, letting herself have one moment of exhaustion. Then she picked up her M4, checked her ammunition one final time, 14 rounds, and keyed the radio. "How many?" 12, maybe 15. "They're moving fast, using the smoke from your incendiary devices as cover. They'll be at the surgical wing in less than 2 minutes. 14 rounds, 15 targets." The mathematics were possible, but improbable. She'd need perfect accuracy, 0 wasted shots, and tactical positioning that multiplied her effectiveness. She'd also need something she'd been avoiding for the last 45 minutes: help. "Morrison," Helena said into the radio, "I need you to do something that's going to terrify you." Morrison's voice came back immediately. "What do you need, ma'am?" "I need you to be brave for approximately 90 seconds. Can you do that?" A pause. Then, "Tell me what to do." Helena smiled despite her exhaustion. The kid was learning. "There's an oxygen tank in the pharmaceutical storage room, the big one, the industrial size we use for emergency supplies. I need you to roll it into the main corridor outside the surgical wing, then shoot it when I give the signal. Can you do that? Won't that just leak oxygen?" "No, Commander. At high velocity impact, it'll explode. The oxygen will ignite from the spark, creating an explosive force that will kill or disorient anyone within 20 feet. It's called a thermobaric effect, and it's going to save everyone in the surgical wing." Silence. Then, "That's insane." "That's combat engineering," Helena corrected. "Now move. You have 90 seconds before those insurgents breach." She heard Morrison running, heard the industrial oxygen tank being rolled across tile floors, heard his labored breathing as fear and determination fought for control of his nervous system. "Tank in position," Morrison gasped. "Dr. Price, if I shoot this and it doesn't explode—" "Then we're all dead anyway," Helena interrupted. "But it will explode, Commander. Trust the physics. Now get clear and wait for my signal." Helena moved through the hospital one final time, positioning herself where she could see the approaching insurgents while maintaining a clear line to the oxygen tank. 15 hostiles advancing in a loose formation using smoke as concealment, moving fast and aggressive. They thought they were attacking a defeated enemy. They thought the worst was over. They thought the old woman who'd killed their comrades was too exhausted to fight anymore. They were about to learn their final lesson in assumptions. "Rodriguez Chen," Helena radioed. "When the explosion happens, you're going to have approximately 5 seconds of shock and disorientation. Use it. Fire everything you have. Don't aim, just shoot into the mass of survivors. Volume of fire matters more than accuracy." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am," they replied in unison. "Donovan, once they're engaged, I need you to get every mobile patient and staff member out through the western emergency exit. The quick reaction force should be approaching by now. Get our people to safety." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you," Helena lied. Now get ready to move." The insurgents were 50 feet from the surgical wing now. 40. 30. Close enough that Helena could see their faces, young men, most of them barely into their 20s, convinced they were warriors fighting a holy cause. They were children playing with rifles, and they were about to learn that war wasn't glory or honor. It was survival by any means necessary. "Morrison," Helena said quietly, "shoot the tank, now." The crack of Morrison's pistol echoed through the corridor. For half a second, nothing happened. Helena's heart stopped calculating how wrong this could go if the physics didn't work the way she'd planned. Then the oxygen tank exploded. The thermobaric blast ripped through the corridor with a pressure wave that Helena felt even from her protected position. The fireball consumed oxygen, creating a vacuum effect that pulled the insurgents toward the detonation before the secondary explosion threw them backward. The sound was deafening, a deep, bone-shaking boom that rattled windows and knocked dust from ceiling tiles. When the smoke cleared, 9 insurgents were down dead or unconscious from the blast. The remaining 6 were stumbling disoriented, their eardrums ruptured, their balance destroyed. Rodriguez and Chen opened fire. Their shots weren't precise, but they didn't need to be. The insurgents couldn't dodge, couldn't return fire effectively, couldn't do anything but die or surrender. 3 more dropped. 2 turned to flee. The last one tried to raise his rifle but fell before he could fire. Helena waited 3 seconds. 5. No more movement. No more threats. "Cease fire," she commanded. "Donovan, evacuate now. Everyone moves to the western exit. I'll cover the retreat." Through her scope, she watched as the surgical wing doors opened and patients began emerging, some walking, some carried by staff, all of them alive because Helena had remembered how to be something other than a doctor when survival required it. Morrison appeared helping an elderly woman navigate the smoke-filled corridor. His face was pale, his hands shaking, but he was moving. He was functioning. He'd followed orders under fire and saved lives. The kid had finally learned what courage actually looked like. Specialist Rodriguez and Private Chen maintained their defensive positions, covering the evacuation with weapons they now held with slightly more confidence. They'd fought. They'd survived. They were no longer children playing soldier, but soldiers who'd learned their first real lessons in combat. "Dr. Price," Donovan radioed. "Last patient is clear. Everyone's out except you and the security team. Time to go, ma'am." Helena lowered her rifle, her body suddenly registering every injury, every strain, every moment of the last hour. She was exhausted beyond anything she'd felt in decades. Her hands hurt. Her knees felt like broken glass. Her back was screaming. She was also alive, and so were 65 patients who'd been marked for execution. "Evacuation confirmed," she replied. "Rodriguez, Chen, fall back to the exit. I'm right behind you." She turned to leave, then stopped. Khalid Nazari lay where she'd left him, still unconscious, bound with medical tape. She could leave him here for the quick reaction force to find. She should leave him here. He was an enemy combatant who'd ordered the execution of civilians. But Helena was also a doctor, and doctors didn't leave patients, even enemy patients, to face uncertain fates. She grabbed Nazari under the arms and started dragging him toward the western exit. Every step hurt. Every movement reminded her that she was 55 years old and had just fought a battle that would have exhausted soldiers half her age. But she was also someone who'd spent 25 years believing that healing mattered more than killing. That saving lives, even enemy lives, was the choice that separated warriors from murderers. "Dr. Price, what are you doing?" Morrison's voice came through the radio, confused and urgent. "My job," Helena replied, still dragging Nazari. "I'm a doctor, Commander. That means I save lives, all lives, even the ones trying to kill me." He ordered the deaths of everyone in this hospital. "And when he wakes up, he'll face justice for that," Helena said. "But I'm not an executioner. I'm a healer. And if I abandon that now, then everything I've fought for in the last 25 years means nothing." She reached the western exit where Donovan and Morrison waited with expressions caught between admiration and disbelief. Behind them, the hospital burned smoke rising from multiple fires' walls, torn by explosions and gunfire, the white canvas marked with red crosses, now stained with blood and ash. Hope Valley Medical Center would need months of repairs. But everyone who'd been inside when the attack started was alive. 65 patients, 28 staff members, 4 security personnel, all of them alive because one 55-year-old doctor had remembered how to be a warrior when survival required it. Quick reaction force is 2 minutes out, Donovan reported. Medical evacuation helicopters behind them. We're going to make it, Dr. Price. Everyone's going to make it. Helena nodded, too exhausted for words. She lowered Nazari to the ground, checked his pulse steady and strong, and then sat beside him, her back against the hospital's exterior wall, her hands shaking with adrenaline crash. Morrison approached cautiously, then knelt beside her. Dr. Price, I need to apologize. I underestimated you. I dismissed your warnings. I called you an old woman who didn't understand military operations. His voice cracked. I was wrong about everything. You were young, Helena corrected gently. Young people always underestimate experience because they've never had enough of it to understand its value. That's not a character flaw, Commander. That's just being human. How did you do it, one person against 48 trained fighters? Helena looked at him, this young commander who'd finally learned that age and capability weren't opposites. I did what I've always done, Commander. I survived, and I used every assumption people made about me, old female doctor, as a weapon. They thought I'd be weak, scared, helpless. Those assumptions killed 32 of them. And the others. Rand surrendered, or learned that underestimating someone based on appearance is a fatal mistake. Helena gestured to the hospital behind them. This wasn't about being strong or fast or young. It was about being smart, patient, and too stubborn to die when everyone expected me to. Morrison nodded slowly, processing lessons his military training had never taught him. What happens now? Now. Helena leaned her head back against the wall, closing her eyes. Now the quick reaction force arrives, secures the area, and starts asking questions I don't want to answer. Intelligence officers will dig through my classified past and discover things that were supposed to stay buried. Reporters will turn this into a story about heroism when really it was just survival. And somewhere, someone will decide that a 55-year-old doctor who killed 32 insurgents is either an asset or a liability to American interests. Which are you? Helena opened her eyes, looking at the young commander who'd finally learned to ask good questions. I'm a doctor, Commander. That's what matters. Everything else, the combat skills, the classified operations, the body count, that's just what I had to remember when people needed protecting. The sound of helicopters grew louder. The quick reaction force was arriving, bringing soldiers and medical personnel and all the bureaucratic complexity that followed military operations. Helena stood her body, protesting every movement, and offered Morrison her hand. Help me up, Commander. We have patients to triage, statements to give, and a hospital to rebuild. The fighting's over, but the work is just beginning. Morrison took her hand, pulling her to her feet. Dr. Price, can I ask one more question? Make it quick. Would you do it again? If another attack came tomorrow, would you fight? Helena looked at the hospital, the place she'd chosen to spend her retirement years healing instead of killing, and then at the patients being loaded into evacuation helicopters alive, because she'd remembered skills she'd hoped never to use again. Every single time, she said quietly, I'm a doctor first, but I'm also someone who understands that sometimes the best way to heal is to stop the threat trying to harm. I don't like it. I'll never like it. But I'll do it whenever my patients need protecting. Even if it costs you everything. Helena smiled, tired and sad and absolutely certain. Commander, I'm 55 years old. I've already given everything once. Giving it again to save lives, that's not a cost. That's a privilege. The helicopters landed and soldiers poured out, securing the perimeter with weapons raised. A female major approached Helena, her expression caught between respect and confusion. Dr. Helena Price. That's me. Ma'am, I'm Major Sarah Chen, Quick Reaction Force Commander. I need to ask, did you really take down an assault force of 48 insurgents by yourself? Helena looked at the Major, at Morrison, at Donovan, and Rodriguez and Chen, who'd all fought beside her, and at the patients being evacuated to safety. Not by myself, Major. I had help from some very brave people. But yes, I stopped the assault. That's what doctors do. We stop things from killing our patients. Major Chen nodded slowly, still processing what she was hearing. Dr. Price, there's going to be a significant investigation. Your classified background is being reviewed right now by intelligence officers who have clearance levels insufficient to access most of my service record, Helena interrupted. I know, I've been through this before, Major. Just get my patients to proper medical facilities and we'll deal with the bureaucracy later. Ma'am, with all due respect, you just conducted a defensive action that's going to be studied in military academies for decades. This isn't bureaucracy. This is exactly what it looks like when people underestimate someone based on appearance, Helena said flatly. Now, if you'll excuse me, Major, I have patients who need proper medical attention. Are you going to help or are you going to stand here asking questions while people wait for treatment? Major Chen stepped aside, speechless. Helena walked toward the evacuation helicopters where medical personnel were already triaging the wounded patients she'd protected. Her body hurt. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She was exhausted in ways that sleep wouldn't fix. But she was also a doctor. And doctors worked until the job was done, until every patient was safe, until healing had replaced harm. The battle was over. The real work was just beginning. And Helena Price, 55 years old, combat medic, Force Recon veteran, and the grandmother who'd killed 32 insurgents, was ready for both. The evacuation helicopter touched down at Forward Operating Base Hammer 40 minutes later, and Helena stepped onto the tarmac with legs that barely supported her weight. Military personnel swarmed immediately, medics rushing toward wounded patients, intelligence officers converging with tablets and recording devices, and somewhere in the chaos, a full bird colonel striding toward her with an expression that promised lengthy conversations she didn't want to have. Dr. Price, I'm Colonel David Martinez, base commander. I need you to come with me immediately. Helena looked at him, then at the patients being unloaded from helicopters. Colonel, I have 65 patients who need proper medical evaluation. Some of them have been without adequate treatment for over an hour due to the attack. We have medical staff handling that, Martinez interrupted. Right now I need you to debrief on what happened at Hope Valley. We have reports of massive casualties among the attacking force, and initial intelligence suggests you were the primary combatant responsible for keeping my patients alive. Helena finished, her voice hardening despite her exhaustion. Yes, Colonel, I was. And if you're asking me to abandon those patients now to satisfy bureaucratic curiosity, then I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. I'm a doctor. My patients come first. Always. Martinez's jaw tightened. Dr. Price, this isn't a request. Your classified service record has been flagged by multiple intelligence agencies, and there are serious questions that can wait until I've ensured every patient from Hope Valley receives proper care. Helena interrupted again. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Martinez could hear. Colonel, I just spent an hour killing people to protect those patients. Don't ask me to abandon them now. You won't like what happens if you do. Something in her tone, something cold and absolutely serious, made Martinez pause. He studied her face, seeing past the gray hair and surgical scrubs to something harder underneath. 2 hours, he said finally. You have 2 hours to handle patient care. Then you report to my office for debriefing. Non-negotiable. Helena nodded. 2 hours. Thank you, Colonel. She turned and walked toward the medical facility, her body screaming with every step. Behind her, she heard Martinez speaking quietly into his radio. Get me everything on Helena Price. Full service record, classified operations, the works. I want to know exactly who we're dealing with. Helena smiled grimly. Good luck with that, Colonel. Most of her service record was buried under classification levels that required presidential authorization to access. By the time Martinez got through the bureaucratic maze, she'd be long gone. The base medical facility was controlled chaos. Doctors and nurses working frantically to triage the influx of patients from Hope Valley. Helena moved through the organized madness with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, reassigning priorities, ensuring that the most critical cases received immediate attention. Dr. Price, a young doctor couldn't be more than 30, approached with a tablet, his face showing the stress of too many patients and not enough resources. We have 3 critical cases requiring immediate surgery, but we only have 2 surgical teams available. I need your assessment on priority. Helena took the tablet, scanning the medical data in seconds. Years of trauma surgery had taught her how to make these decisions, the terrible mathematics of triage, where choosing who to save meant accepting who might die. Patient 1, the shrapnel wound to the abdomen. That's your priority. Get him into surgery now before he bleeds out internally. She scrolled to the next case. Patient 2 can wait 30 minutes if we stabilize with blood transfusions. Patient 3. She paused, studying the data. Patient 3 needs surgery within the hour or we'll lose him. Can you pull another surgeon from general duty? Everyone's committed to other cases. Then I'll do it, Helena said, handing back the tablet. Prep patient 3 for surgery. I'll scrub in as soon as I finish checking the remaining Hope Valley patients. The young doctor stared at her. Dr. Price, with all respect, you just fought a battle. You're exhausted. You can't possibly. I'm a trauma surgeon with 25 years of experience, Helena interrupted. Exhausted is my natural state in emergency situations. Now prep that patient before we lose him debating whether I'm capable of doing my job. The doctor nodded and hurried away. Helena continued moving through the medical facility, her trained eye catching details that less experienced physicians might miss. A patient with signs of internal bleeding that hadn't been flagged. Another showing early symptoms of shock despite stable vitals. A third whose pain medications were insufficient for their injuries. She made corrections, issued orders, and kept moving. This was what she knew. This was who she was when the fighting stopped a doctor trying to fix what violence had broken. Dr. Price. Helena turned. Commander Morrison stood behind her, his face cleaner now, but still showing the stress of combat. His hands weren't shaking anymore, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who'd learned hard truths about himself. Commander, you should be resting. I can't, Morrison said quietly. Every time I close my eyes, I keep replaying what happened. 12 men I watched die in that hospital. 30 more killed before I even knew what was happening. And you, his voice cracked. You were doing things I didn't think were possible. Things I was trained to believe couldn't happen. Helena stopped walking, giving him her full attention despite her exhaustion. What do you want to know, Commander? How do you live with it, the killing? You're a doctor. You took an oath to do no harm. But today, I protected my patients, Helena said firmly. That's not doing harm, Commander. That's preventing harm. There's a difference, and you need to understand it if you're going to survive in combat zones. Morrison shook his head. I don't think I can survive. I froze, Dr. Price. When the shooting started, I froze. I hid in the security office while you fought. While people died because I was too scared to act. What kind of commander does that? Helena studied him for a long moment, seeing in his face the same crisis of confidence she'd seen in dozens of young officers over the years. The moment when training met reality and reality won. You rolled an oxygen tank into a corridor and shot it on my command, Helena said quietly. You followed orders under fire and saved lives. You didn't freeze when it mattered, Commander. You adapted. After you did all the hard work. Combat isn't about individual heroics, Helena corrected. It's about doing your part in a larger mission. Your part was following orders you didn't understand, trusting someone else's experience, and executing when failure meant death. You did that. Be proud of it. Morrison's eyes glistened. I'm not brave like you. I'm not brave, Helena said flatly. I'm experienced. Bravery is what young people call experience when they don't understand the difference. I've spent 30 years learning how to survive situations that should kill me. That's not courage, Commander. That's stubbornness and tactical knowledge. Still, You did well. Helena interrupted, her voice softening slightly. You learned under fire, followed orders despite your fear, and kept people alive. That's all combat requires. Stop expecting yourself to be a hero and start accepting that you're a soldier who did his job. The rest is just ego talking. Morrison nodded, slowly processing this. Dr. Price, when the investigation starts, and it will start, they're going to ask questions about your background. About how a 55-year-old civilian doctor killed 32 trained insurgents. What are you going to tell them? The truth, Helena said simply. That I'm a doctor who used to be something else, and that something else became necessary when my patients needed protecting. Beyond that, they can read my classified service record if they can get clearance. Most of them can't. What if they try to force you to explain? Helena smiled without humor. Commander, I've been interrogated by people significantly more frightening than base intelligence officers. They can try whatever they want. I'll tell them what I choose to tell them and nothing more. A nurse approached, interrupting. Dr. Price, patient 3 is prepped for surgery. We're ready when you are. Helena nodded, then looked at Morrison one last time. Get some rest, Commander. The investigation can wait. Your mental health can't. She left him standing in the corridor and headed toward the surgical suite, her mind already shifting from combat mode to surgical mode. Different skills, different decisions, same fundamental commitment to keeping people alive. The surgery took 90 minutes. The patient, a 21-year-old local man who'd been caught in the crossfire, survived with minimal complications. Helena closed the incision with hands that had stopped shaking, her muscle memory taking over, despite exhaustion that made her vision blur. Excellent work, Dr. Price, the assisting surgeon said as they stripped off gloves. You just fought a battle and then performed flawless surgery. I don't know how you do it. Practice, Helena replied. Lots of practice. She scrubbed out, changed into clean scrubs, and checked her watch. 2 hours and 17 minutes since she'd agreed to meet Colonel Martinez. She was late, which would probably annoy him. Good. Annoyed superiors asked sloppier questions. Martinez's office was in the base's command center, and Helena walked there with the gait of someone too tired to care about military protocols. She knocked once, then entered without waiting for permission. Martinez sat behind his desk, and he wasn't alone. 2 civilians in suits flanked him, intelligence officers, obviously with the kind of bland faces that came from years of asking questions nobody wanted to answer. A third person sat in the corner, a woman in her early 50s wearing an Army general's uniform with enough medals to suggest a career that had seen serious action. The general stood as Helena entered, and something in her expression shifted from professional curiosity to something warmer. Captain Price, the general said quietly. It's been a long time. Helena stopped, her exhausted brain placing the face. General Reeves, last time I saw you, you were a lieutenant leading reconnaissance in Nicaragua. Last time I saw you, you were saving my life by calling in air support despite being under heavy fire, Reeves replied. Looks like saving lives is still your specialty, even when it requires taking them. One of the intelligence officers cleared his throat. Dr. Price, I'm Agent William Carter, Defense Intelligence Agency. This is Agent Sarah Kim. We need to ask you some questions about what happened at Hope Valley Medical Center. Helena sat without being invited, her body grateful for the chair despite her mind's wariness. Ask your questions, Agent Carter. I'll answer what I can. Your service record indicates you were discharged from Marine Force Recon in 1995 after sustaining combat injuries. Medical discharge, honorable separation, classified service history. That was 30 years ago. 29 years and 7 months, Helena corrected. But yes, approximately 30 years. Yet today you single-handedly engaged and defeated a military assault force of 48 trained insurgents, killing 32 and wounding 16 others. How does a 55-year-old civilian doctor accomplish that? Helena met his eyes steadily. By remembering what I learned before I became a doctor, and by refusing to let my patients be executed by terrorists who thought a humanitarian hospital would be defenseless. Agent Kim leaned forward. Dr. Price, your classified service record shows 73 confirmed kills during your Force Recon career. Today you added 32 more. That's a significant body count for someone who's been practicing medicine for 2.5 decades. Combat skills don't fade, Agent Kim. They just sleep until circumstances require their awakening. Today's circumstances required a lot of awakening. Some people might say that level of violence is excessive, Carter suggested. That a doctor has an ethical obligation to preserve life, not take it. Helena's expression hardened. Some people didn't watch 48 insurgents enter a hospital planning to execute 65 patients and 28 staff members. I did. And I made a choice, their lives or my patients' lives. I chose my patients. If you think that's excessive, Agent Carter, then you're welcome to spend less time asking questions and more time explaining what you would have done differently. Silence filled the room. Colonel Martinez shifted uncomfortably. General Reeves's expression showed something between pride and concern. Dr. Price, Reeves said quietly, nobody's questioning your decisions. You saved lives. That's commendable. But your actions today have raised questions about whether your classified background should remain classified. My service record is classified for reasons that have nothing to do with today's actions, Helena replied. I participated in operations that involved foreign governments, intelligence assets, and tactical decisions that would create diplomatic incidents if they became public knowledge. That classification exists to protect national security, not to protect me. But your combat effectiveness today demonstrates that you still possess skills that could be valuable to ongoing operations, Agent Kim pressed. Skills that the military invested significant resources in developing. Some people think those skills should be utilized rather than wasted on humanitarian medical work. Helena stood abruptly, her exhaustion replaced by cold anger. Agent Kim, I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. I spent 7 years of my life becoming very good at killing people. Then I spent 25 years becoming even better at saving them. I made that choice deliberately, consciously, and permanently. I don't regret it. I won't reverse it. And if you think you can recruit me back into covert operations because I demonstrated combat proficiency today, then you fundamentally misunderstand who I am. Dr. Price. I'm not finished. Helena interrupted, her voice carrying the command authority that had made insurgents flee. I killed 32 people today, 32 human beings who woke up this morning expecting to go home tonight. They don't get that anymore because I was better at violence than they were. I'll live with that. I'll add it to the 73 others I carry. But I did it to protect my patients, people who couldn't protect themselves, people who trusted me to keep them safe. That's the only reason I would ever use those skills again. She leaned forward, placing her hands on Martinez's desk. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to return to Hope Valley Medical Center once it's repaired. I'm going to continue practicing medicine. And I'm going to forget this conversation ever happened. What you do with my service record is your business, but what I do with my skills is mine. Are we clear? Agent Carter opened his mouth to object, but General Reeves stood, cutting him off. We're clear, Dr. Price. Thank you for your time. Reeves looked at the two agents. Gentlemen, Dr. Price has had a long day. I think we can continue this conversation another time. General, with respect, we need to... Another time, Agent Carter, Reeves said firmly. That's not a suggestion. The agents left clearly unhappy. Colonel Martinez excused himself with obvious relief, leaving Helena alone with the general who'd once been a lieutenant she'd saved in Nicaragua. You haven't changed, Helena, Reeves said quietly, still as stubborn as ever. I learned from the best, Helena replied, her anger fading into exhaustion. You were pretty stubborn yourself when you refused to evacuate despite taking shrapnel to the leg. I was also 23 and stupid, Reeves said with a slight smile. You were 27 and had already figured out that survival mattered more than glory. I remember you carrying me 3 miles through hostile territory while calling in air support. You saved my life that day. You've returned the favor by keeping those intelligence vultures from recruiting me, Helena said. We're even. Reeves shook her head. Helena, they're right about one thing. Your combat effectiveness today is remarkable, not just for your age, but absolutely. You conducted a defensive action that should have required a platoon of trained soldiers. Intelligence agencies are going to keep circling, trying to pull you back into operations. Let them circle, Helena said tiredly. I've spent 25 years being very clear about who I am and what I do. Today didn't change that. It just reminded everyone that assumptions about age and capability are dangerous. You could teach, Reeves suggested. train the next generation of combat medics, share those skills with people who might need them. Helena paused, considering this. Maybe. If it meant helping medical personnel protect their patients. But I'm not becoming an operator again, General. That part of my life is over. Is it? Reeves asked gently. You killed 32 insurgents today, Helena. You used tactics that haven't been relevant in decades but proved devastatingly effective. You became Captain Price again, even if only for an hour. Can you really say that part of you is dead? Helena met her old friend's eyes. It's not dead, General. It's just sleeping. And I prefer it that way. Today was an exception, a necessary exception, but still an exception. I'm a doctor. That's who I choose to be. And if another exception happens, Helena smiled sadly, then I'll do what I did today. I'll protect my patients by any means necessary. But I'll hate it. I'll hate every shot I fire, every life I take, every moment I spend being Captain Price instead of Dr. Price. That's the difference between me and the operators the intelligence agencies want. They enjoy the work. I endure it when necessary and spend the rest of my life trying to balance the equation by saving more lives than I've taken. Reeves nodded slowly. You're one of the good ones, Helena. Always have been. I'm just tired, Helena corrected. Tired and 55 years old and trying to figure out how to sleep tonight knowing I added 32 more ghosts to the collection. But thank you for running interference with the intelligence community. I owe you one. You owe me nothing, Reeves said firmly. You've saved enough lives to earn peace. If you want to spend the rest of your career in a humanitarian hospital, you've earned that right. I'll do what I can to keep the vultures away. Helena stood to leave, then paused. General, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you still think about Nicaragua, about the people we killed getting you out? Reeves's expression grew distant. Every day. Even 30 years later, I remember their faces. Is that what you wanted to hear? No, Helena said quietly. I wanted to hear that it gets easier, that eventually the ghosts stop visiting. But I already knew that wasn't true. It doesn't get easier, Reeves confirmed, but it gets different. You learn to live with it. You learn that the people you saved matter more than the people you killed. You learn that being haunted is the price of being effective. She paused. Is that enough? It has to be, Helena replied, because it's all we get.
Voice 5, my name is so.
She left the office, walked through the base's corridors, and found her temporary quarters, a small room with a cot and a single window. She sat on the cot, removed her boots, and let herself feel everything she'd been suppressing for the last 4 hours. The pain in her hands from weapon recoil, the ache in her knees from constant movement, the exhaustion that made her entire body feel like it was made of lead, and underneath it all, the emotional weight of 32 lives ended by her decisions, her actions, her skills that she'd hoped never to use again. She'd saved 65 patients. She'd protected 28 staff members. She'd kept Commander Morrison alive despite his incompetence, and she'd ensured that Khalid Nazari faced justice instead of execution. But she'd also killed 32 people, 32 human beings with families, histories, reasons they believed justified their actions. She'd ended all of that with precise shots and tactical decisions, and 3 decades of suppressed skills awakening when survival required them. Helena lay back on the cot, staring at the ceiling, and wondered how many more lives she'd need to save before the equation balanced. How many surgeries? How many patients pulled back from death's edge? How many people healed before the ghosts stopped multiplying? She was 55 years old. She'd spent half her life learning to kill and half learning to heal. Today had proven she could still do both when necessary. She just wished necessity wasn't such a cold comfort. Someone knocked on her door. Helena sat up, suddenly alert despite her exhaustion. Come in. Staff Sergeant Donovan entered, his face still showing the stress of combat, but his eyes clearer now. Dr. Price, I wanted to thank you for training me, for trusting me with responsibilities I didn't think I could handle. You saved my life today. You saved all our lives. You saved yourself, Sergeant. I just gave you opportunities to prove what you were capable of. Still, I wanted you to know Donovan paused, searching for words. I wanted you to know that what you did today, it mattered. Not just tactically. You showed us that age doesn't determine capability. That assumptions kill. That the person everyone underestimates might be the most dangerous person in the room. He smiled slightly. That's a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my career. Helena felt something loosen in her chest, a small release of tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. Thank you, Sergeant. That means more than you know. Donovan nodded and left. Helena lay back down, and for the first time in hours, she felt something other than exhaustion and guilt. She felt purpose. She was a doctor. She saved lives. And when saving lives required remembering skills, she'd tried to forget she could do that too. She was 55 years old. She was Captain Price and Dr. Price. She was a warrior and a healer. And she'd proven today that those identities weren't contradictions. They were survival. Helena woke at dawn to find Commander Morrison standing outside her door with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that suggested he hadn't slept at all. She took the coffee without comment, noting the tremor in his hands that matched her own. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. Every time I close my eyes, I see those men burning, Morrison said quietly. The ones from the oxygen tank explosion. I keep thinking about their families, about people who'll never know what happened to them. About how I killed 12 people by shooting a tank on your orders. Helena sipped her coffee, considering her words carefully. Commander, those 12 men were advancing to execute 65 patients who couldn't defend themselves. You didn't kill them because you wanted to. You killed them because the alternative was watching children die. There's a difference, and you need to understand it, or the guilt will destroy you. How do you live with it? The killing. Badly, Helena admitted. I carry every face, every name when I knew it, every moment of violence I've committed in 30 years. It doesn't get easier, Commander. But it gets balanced by the lives I've saved. By the patients who survived because I remembered skills I wished I could forget. That's all we get. The hope that the scales eventually tip toward healing instead of harm. Morrison nodded, slowly processing this. Dr. Price, there's something you should know. While you were sleeping, Agent Carter started making calls. He's building a case to have you reassigned to military intelligence operations. He thinks your combat effectiveness is too valuable to waste on humanitarian medicine. Helena's expression hardened. Let him try. I've been refusing recruitment offers for 25 years. One more intelligence officer won't change my mind. This one has authorization from higher up, Morrison warned. I overheard him talking about national security priorities, ongoing operations in hostile territories, the need for experienced operators who can blend into civilian populations. He's serious, Dr. Price, and he's got support from people who outrank General Reeves. Helena stood, her exhaustion replaced by cold anger. Then it's time to remind everyone exactly why I left military service in the first place. Come with me, Commander. You're about to learn how to fight bureaucracy instead of insurgents. She found Agent Carter in the base's intelligence center, surrounded by computers and analysts, reviewing footage from Hope Valley's security cameras. He looked up as Helena entered, his expression shifting from surprise to carefully controlled neutrality. Dr. Price, I wasn't expecting you so early. I'm sure you weren't, Helena replied coolly. Commander Morrison tells me you're building a case to have me reassigned to intelligence operations. I'm here to save you the effort. The answer is no. Carter stood, gesturing to a private conference room. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Perhaps you should accept my answer without requiring discussion, Helena countered. I'm not interested in returning to operations. I'm a doctor. That's non-negotiable. Dr. Price, with respect, your combat effectiveness yesterday demonstrates capabilities that the intelligence community desperately needs. We're facing threats that require experienced operators who can kill efficiently while maintaining civilian cover. Helena interrupted. I know the pitch, Agent Carter. I've heard it from a dozen recruiters over 2 decades. The answer hasn't changed. Carter pulled up security footage on a tablet showing Helena moving through Hope Valley's corridors with tactical precision that looked nothing like a civilian doctor. You eliminated 32 trained insurgents in under an hour using improvised weapons and terrain knowledge. That's not just combat experience, Dr. Price. That's genius-level tactical thinking combined with decades of refined skills. The intelligence community has maybe 10 operators worldwide with your capability level. We can't afford to waste that. You're not wasting it, Helena said flatly. You're just uncomfortable with the idea that I'm using those skills to protect humanitarian patients instead of advance intelligence objectives. But here's what you need to understand. Agent Carter, I didn't develop those skills for you. I developed them for survival, and I refined them through 25 years of medicine because saving lives matters more than any mission you could offer. Dr. Price, I have authorization to... You have authorization to ask. Helena interrupted, her voice dropping to the command tone that made people obey without thinking. You don't have authorization to compel. I'm a civilian. My military service ended 30 years ago, and unless you're planning to kidnap me, which would be illegal even for intelligence operations, you're going to accept my refusal and move on. Agent Kim entered the conference room, her expression urgent. Carter, we have a problem. The Hope Valley security footage is being requested by international media. Someone leaked the story about a 55-year-old female doctor single-handedly defeating an insurgent assault force. It's going viral. Carter's face went pale. How viral? CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, every major news network is running the story. They're calling her the Guardian of Hope Valley. Social media is exploding with speculation about her background. We have maybe 6 hours before her classified service record becomes the most requested intelligence document in the Pentagon. Helena smiled without humor. Sounds like you have bigger problems than my recruitment status, Agent Carter. I suggest you focus on damage control instead of trying to draft me into operations I've already refused. She turned to leave, but Carter's voice stopped her. Dr. Price, if your classified background becomes public knowledge, you'll never have peace. Every journalist, every conspiracy theorist, every foreign intelligence service will be investigating your past. Is that really what you want? Helena paused, considering this. He was right. Public exposure of her Force Recon background would destroy any chance of returning to quiet medical work. But the alternative was allowing herself to be recruited back into operations that would require her to become Captain Price permanently instead of Dr. Price occasionally. Agent Carter, I'm going to make you an offer, Helena said slowly. I'll cooperate with your damage control efforts. I'll give carefully scripted interviews that protect classified operations while explaining my actions at Hope Valley. I'll help you maintain operational security, but in exchange, you drop all recruitment efforts permanently. You accept that I'm a doctor who happens to have combat training, not an operator who moonlights in medicine. Deal. Carter exchanged glances with Kim, calculating. I'll need to clear this with my superiors. You have 2 hours, Helena said. After that, I'm giving an unscripted interview to the first journalist who asks. Your choice, Agent Carter. Controlled cooperation or chaotic publicity? Which serves national security better? She left before he could respond. Morrison following with an expression caught between awe and terror. Dr. Price, you just threatened a DIA agent. I negotiated with a DIA agent, Helena corrected. There's a difference. Threats imply I'm bluffing. I'm not. You'd really give an unscripted interview expose classified operations? No, Helena admitted. But Agent Carter doesn't know that. And uncertainty is a weapon, Commander. Never forget that. The next 6 hours passed in controlled chaos. Helena gave 3 carefully scripted interviews to major news networks explaining her actions at Hope Valley as defensive measures taken by a doctor with prior military medical training. She downplayed her combat effectiveness, emphasized the heroism of Morrison and the security team, and redirected attention toward the patients who'd survived rather than the insurgents who'd died. It was masterful media manipulation, and Agent Carter watched from the sidelines with grudging respect. You're good at this, he said quietly during a break between interviews. Most operators can't handle media attention without compromising security. You're making this look easy. It's not easy, Helena replied. It's exhausting, but it's better than the alternative. Do we have a deal? Agent Carter? Carter nodded slowly. My superiors agreed to your terms. No recruitment efforts in exchange for continued cooperation on damage control. You're free to return to humanitarian medicine, Dr. Price. Though I'm required to tell you that this offer remains open if you ever change your mind. I won't, Helena said firmly, but I appreciate the professional courtesy. She finished the final interview, changed back into civilian clothes, and walked to the base's medical facility where Hope Valley patients were still recovering. The 7-year-old boy with shrapnel wounds was sitting up in bed, his mother holding his hand while a nurse checked his vitals. Dr. Price, the boy called out, his face brightening. You saved me. My mom says you're a hero. Helena sat on the edge of his bed, her expression gentle. I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I'm just a doctor who kept you safe. That's what doctors do. But you fought the bad men. Everyone's talking about it. I did what was necessary, Helena corrected gently. But the real heroes are the nurses and doctors here who are helping you heal. They're the ones making you better. I just made sure they had the chance to do their jobs. The boy's mother touched Helena's hand, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Thank you for protecting my son. I don't know how to repay. You don't repay it, Helena interrupted softly. You just live your life, raise your son, and remember that when people needed help, there were those willing to provide it. That's enough. She moved through the facility, checking on each Hope Valley patient personally. The 12-year-old girl recovering from surgery, the teenager who'd stepped on a landmine, the elderly man with heart complications, each one alive because Helena had remembered how to be something other than a doctor when survival required it. Specialist Rodriguez found her in the pediatric ward, her face showing a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. Dr. Price, I wanted to thank you for yesterday, for teaching me that being scared doesn't mean being useless. I thought I'd failed as a soldier because I was terrified during the fighting. But you showed me that fear is normal. What matters is functioning despite it. That's exactly right, Rodriguez, Helena confirmed. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite fear. You did that yesterday. Be proud. I am, Rodriguez said quietly. But I'm also confused. You're a doctor. You dedicated your life to healing. How do you reconcile that with the killing you did yesterday? Helena considered this carefully, knowing her answer would shape how this young soldier understood violence for the rest of her career. Rodriguez's healing and fighting aren't opposites. They're both forms of protection. Yesterday, I protected my patients by eliminating the threat to their lives. That required violence. It required killing. But the purpose wasn't destruction. It was preservation. I didn't kill those insurgents because I wanted them dead. I killed them because I wanted my patients alive. There's a profound difference, and it's the only thing that lets me sleep at night. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Will you go back to Hope Valley after what happened? If they'll have me, Helena said. That hospital needs doctors who understand that humanitarian work sometimes happens in dangerous places, that protection and healing go hand in hand. I can provide both now. Whether the hospital administration accepts that is their decision. The answer came 3 days later when Dr. Marcus Chen appeared at the base. His expression a complicated mix of respect and discomfort. Helena met him in the visitor center, noting the way he held himself differently now, less condescending, more careful. Dr. Price, the hospital board wants you back, Chen said without preamble. They're rebuilding Hope Valley Medical Center with enhanced security measures, and they want you to oversee the medical operations during reconstruction. What changed their mind? Helena asked. Last time we spoke, you were trying to push me toward administrative work because you thought I was too old for trauma surgery. Chen had the grace to look embarrassed. I was wrong. About your age, about your capabilities, about everything. You saved 65 patients and 28 staff members by doing things I didn't believe were possible. The board recognizes that. They want you back, Dr. Price, and they're willing to give you whatever support you need, including acceptance that I won't hesitate to protect my patients by any means necessary. Including that, Chen confirmed. We're also implementing new training protocols for all staff, basic security awareness, emergency procedures, defensive medicine in hostile environments. We'd like you to help develop those programs. Helena smiled slightly. Defensive medicine. I like that term. It's honest about the realities of humanitarian work in conflict zones. Is that a yes? It's a yes, Helena confirmed. But I have conditions. I want full authority over medical operations. I want security personnel who understand that protecting patients comes before protocol. And I want Commander Morrison assigned as our military liaison. Chen blinked. Morrison. The commander who froze during the initial assault. The commander who learned under fire and saved lives when it mattered, Helena corrected. He's young and inexperienced, but he's teachable. And he understands now that assumptions about capability are dangerous. That's exactly the kind of officer we need. Chen nodded. I'll make it happen. When can you return? Give me a week to finish coordinating patient care here, then I'm yours. Chen left, and Helena found herself sitting in the base's chapel, a small, quiet space where soldiers came to process the weight of combat. She hadn't been in a chapel in years, hadn't prayed since before her Force Recon days, when violence became routine enough to make faith complicated. But today felt different. Today felt like an ending and a beginning simultaneously. You look lost, Captain. Helena turned. General Reeves stood in the doorway, her uniform replaced with casual civilian clothes that made her look younger and less imposing. Not lost, Helena corrected. Just thinking about choices, about who I was, who I became, and who I'm choosing to be going forward. Reeves sat beside her. You proved yesterday that you're still one of the best tactical operators I've ever seen. 30 years of civilian medicine didn't diminish those skills. If anything, it refined them, gave you patience and psychological insight that made you even more effective. Is this another recruitment pitch? No, Reeves said firmly. This is a friend telling you that you don't have to choose anymore. You spent 30 years believing you had to be either a warrior or a healer. Yesterday proved you can be both, that those identities complement each other rather than contradict. Helena was quiet for a long moment. I killed 32 people, General. 32 human beings who might have had families, children, reasons they believed justified their actions. I ended all of that because I was better at violence than they were. How is that complementary to healing? Because those 32 deaths prevented 65 murders, Reeves replied. Because your violence protected the innocent. Because you used skills designed for destruction to accomplish preservation. That's not contradiction, Helena. That's integration. You're not two people anymore, the warrior and the healer. You're one person who understands that sometimes healing requires fighting. And the guilt, the weight of carrying all those deaths, becomes bearable when you remember all the lives you've saved, Reeves said. I won't tell you it disappears, but I will tell you that 30 years from now you'll remember the 7-year-old boy's smile more clearly than the insurgent's face. You'll remember the patients you healed more vividly than the enemies you killed. That's how you survive it, Helena, by focusing on what you preserved rather than what you destroyed. Helena felt tears burning behind her eyes, the first tears she'd allowed since the battle ended. I'm tired, General. I'm 55 years old and I'm tired of carrying ghosts. I just want to be a doctor. I just want to heal people without having to kill anyone ever again. I know, Reeves said gently, but the universe doesn't always give us what we want. Sometimes it gives us what we're capable of handling. And you, Helena Price, are capable of carrying this weight while still helping others. That's your gift and your curse. Some gift. It kept 65 people alive, Reeves reminded her, including children who'll grow up to have children of their own because you refuse to let them die. That's not nothing, Helena. That's everything. Helena wiped her eyes, straightening her shoulders with visible effort. I'm going back to Hope Valley. I'm going to train medical staff in defensive medicine. I'm going to teach doctors and nurses how to protect their patients in hostile environments. And maybe if I'm lucky, I'll save enough lives to balance the scales before I'm too old to hold a scalpel. You'll never be too old, Reeves said with certainty. Some people age into irrelevance. You've aged into competence. There's a difference. And it's why people like Agent Carter can't accept that you're choosing humanitarian medicine over intelligence operations. People like Carter don't understand that power isn't just about capability, Helena replied. It's about choice. I have the capability to be an operator. I choose to be a doctor. That choice is my power, not my limitation. Reeves smiled. That's the Helena Price I remember. The one who never let anyone else define her worth or her purpose. Welcome back, Captain. Or should I say Dr. Price? Just Helena, she replied. The ranks and titles don't matter anymore. What matters is the work, and I have a lot of work ahead of me. 3 weeks later, Helena stood in the rebuilt Hope Valley Medical Center, watching construction workers install reinforced walls and security systems that would make the hospital more defensible without losing its humanitarian character. Commander Morrison worked beside her coordinating security protocols with medical staff who no longer saw security as separate from healing. It's different now, Morrison observed. The whole atmosphere. Before, security and medical staff barely talked to each other. Now they're integrated, working together, understanding that they're all protecting the same people. That's what defensive medicine looks like, Helena replied. Not doctors trying to be soldiers or soldiers trying to be doctors, but both groups understanding their roles in protecting patients. You helped create that, Commander. Be proud. Morrison shook his head. You created it, I just followed your lead. Leadership isn't about being first, Helena corrected. It's about showing others what's possible and letting them become better versions of themselves. You did that. Rodriguez and Chen did that. Even Dr. Chen learned that assumptions about age and capability are dangerous. That's the real victory, Commander, not the tactical success, but the institutional learning that followed. A nurse approached young maybe 26 with the nervous energy of someone new to combat zones. Dr. Price, we have a patient incoming, civilian with shrapnel wounds from a roadside explosion. ETA 3 minutes. Helena's mind shifted immediately into medical mode. Prep surgical suite 2. Get blood typed and crossed. I want trauma panels ready and imaging capabilities standing by. This is what we do, people. We heal. Everything else is just preparation for this moment. The staff moved with practiced efficiency, and Helena watched with satisfaction. This was what Hope Valley had become, not just a hospital, but a fortress of healing where doctors understood that protecting patients sometimes required more than medicine. The ambulance arrived and Helena moved into her element, assessing injuries, making rapid decisions, coordinating treatment with the kind of confidence that came from decades of experience. The patient survived. The surgery was successful. Another life saved. Another small weight added to the positive side of the scales she'd been balancing for 30 years. As she scrubbed out of surgery, Helena caught her reflection in the medical facility's windows. Gray hair tied back, surgical scrubs stained with blood, hands steady despite exhaustion. 55 years old and still fighting to keep people alive. She looked exactly like what she was, a doctor who'd learned that healing sometimes required fighting, that protecting life occasionally demanded taking it, and that the assumptions people made about age and capability were weapons she could use against anyone stupid enough to underestimate her. Dr. Price. Rodriguez appeared, now assigned permanently to Hope Valley's security detail. We've got movement on the perimeter sensors. Probably nothing but. I wanted you to know we're checking it out. Good, Helena said. Stay alert. Stay professional. And remember, your job is protecting patients, not proving courage. Understand? Yes, ma'am. Rodriguez left, and Helena returned to the ward, where recovering patients waited for evening rounds. The 7-year-old boy was sitting up drawing pictures of helicopters and doctors. The 12-year-old girl was reading. The elderly man was sleeping peacefully, his heart stable for the first time in weeks. All of them alive, because Helena had refused to let them die. Morrison found her an hour later standing on the hospital's rebuilt roof, looking at the sunset over mountains that had seen too much violence and not enough healing. Dr. Price, the security upgrades are complete. Hope Valley Medical Center is now one of the most defensible humanitarian hospitals in the region. We can protect our patients against anything short of a military assault. And if we face another military assault? Helena asked quietly. Morrison smiled slightly. Then we have you, the grandmother who killed 32 insurgents and proved that underestimating someone based on age is fatal. I think we'll be fine. Helena smiled despite herself. I'm not a deterrent, Commander. I'm a doctor who got lucky. You're a legend, Morrison corrected. The story of Hope Valley has spread through every military base in the region. Insurgent groups are avoiding this hospital specifically because they're afraid of the Guardian. That's not luck, Dr. Price. That's reputation. Reputation built on violence, Helena said. That's not the legacy I wanted. But it's the legacy that keeps your patients safe, Morrison replied. And isn't that what matters? You spent 30 years trying to balance the scales between lives taken and lives saved. Now you've created a situation where your past violence prevents future violence. The scales aren't just balancing, Dr. Price. They're tipping decisively toward healing. Helena considered this, looking at the hospital below, lights glowing in windows where patients recovered, staff members moving between rooms providing care, security personnel maintaining watchful positions that protected without threatening. This was what she'd built. Not through violence alone, but through the integration of healing and fighting, protection and compassion, tactical awareness and medical expertise. She was 55 years old. She'd killed 81 people over her lifetime. She'd saved thousands more through medical care. And she'd proven that age didn't determine capability, that assumptions were weapons, and that the most dangerous person in any situation might be the grandmother everyone underestimated. Commander Morrison, Helena said quietly, I want you to remember something. When you're my age, looking back on your career, you won't remember the battles you won or the promotions you earned. You'll remember the lives you protected and the people you helped become better versions of themselves. That's the real measure of success in this work. Not the body count or the medals, the lives preserved and the lessons taught. I'll remember, Morrison promised. And Dr. Price, thank you for teaching me that courage isn't the absence of fear, for showing me that age is experience, not limitation, for proving that the person everyone underestimates might be the most capable person in the room. Helena smiled. You're welcome, Commander. Now get back to work. We have patients to protect and a hospital to run. The fighting's over, but the real work never ends. She descended from the roof, returning to the wards where patients needed her skills and expertise, where her decades of experience mattered more than her age, where her ability to protect lives through healing and fighting made her invaluable rather than obsolete. Helena Price was 55 years old. She was a doctor. She was a former Force Recon operator. She was someone who'd learned that healing and fighting weren't opposites, but complementary skills in the service of protecting innocent lives. She was proof that assumptions kill, that age is experience, that capability transcends demographics, and that the most dangerous person in any hospital might be wearing surgical scrubs and gray hair. She was the Guardian of Hope Valley, though she'd never accept that title publicly. But most importantly, she was exactly who she chose to be. A healer who would fight when necessary. A warrior who preferred saving lives to taking them. And a 55-year-old woman who'd proven that everyone who underestimated her made their last mistake. The scales would never fully balance. The ghosts would never completely fade. The weight of 81 lives taken would never disappear entirely. But thousands of lives saved created their own weight, their own balance, their own justification for everything Helena had done and everything she would do in whatever time remained. She was a doctor. She saved lives. And when saving lives required fighting, she fought with the competence of someone who'd spent 30 years learning that survival mattered more than glory. Experience trumped youth, and assumptions about age and capability were the most fatal mistakes anyone could make. That was Helena Price. That was her legacy. That was her truth. And in a hospital on the Afghan-Pakistan border, where violence and healing competed for dominance, that truth kept patients alive and taught everyone who witnessed it that the old woman with the gun was never just an old woman. She was the most dangerous kind of protector, the one everyone underestimated until it was far too late to matter.